Welcome back to the Midnight Trench. Tonight, we journey far beyond the boundaries of the known world to a place where time seems to freeze and the noise of civilization fades into an absolute breathless silence. Close your eyes. Let the rhythm of your breathing slow down. Imagine a world of pure white and deep, endless blue. We are traveling to the Svalbard archipelago, a cluster of jagged, icy islands anchored in the desolate expanse of the Arctic Ocean. Here, the wind is a permanent resident, whispering secrets over ancient buzzed glaciers and frozen fjords. In the winter of 1944, while the rest of Europe was consumed by the roaring flames and thunderous chaos of World War II, a tiny group of men was sent here. They were not sent to fight with guns, but with instruments. Their enemy was not an army, but the brutal, unyielding cold. And long after the guns fell silent across the continent, long after the peace treaties were signed and the world began to rebuild, these men remained, forgotten by history, isolated by the ice, becoming the very last German unit to surrender. Relax into the darkness, listen to the distant howl of the polar wind, and let us uncover the story of Operation Haudegen. It is September 1944. The German submarine U-307 cuts through the dark, frigid waters of the Barents Sea. On board are 11 men, led by a scientist and officer named Wilhelm Degen. They are not frontline soldiers. They are meteorologists, geographers, and specialists. Their mission is codenamed Operation Haudegen, Operation Broadsword. As the submarine surfaces through the slush and ice, the men step out into a world that feels entirely alien. Before them lies Ripple Fjord on Nordaustlandet, a remote island in the Svalbard chain. There are no trees here, no buildings, no signs of human life. Only the immense, towering mountains of snow and an ocean that threatens to freeze solid at any moment. The silence of the Arctic is not empty, Wilhelm Degen would later note in his diary. It is a heavy, living thing. It presses against your ears, reminding you every second of just how small you are. The crew works with urgent efficiency. They must build their station before the polar night sets in, the terrifying period where the sun sinks below the horizon and does not return for months. They unload crates of scientific equipment, dried rations, books, a record player, and heavy wooden beams. Within days, a small, heavily insulated wooden hut is erected. It features 2 main rooms, a living and sleeping quarter with bunks, and a wireless radio room filled with dials, glowing vacuum tubes, and map tables. This tiny wooden box would be their entire universe. By November, the sun disappears completely. The world transitions into a perpetual twilight, and then into a deep, velvet darkness that lasts 24 hours a day. Listen to the atmosphere of this place. Outside the heavy wooden door of the hut, the temperature plummets to -30, -40 degrees. The wind picks up, carrying fine crystalline snow that lashes against the double-paned windows like handfuls of sand. It is a lonely, rhythmic sound. Shh, 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 interrupted only by the deep, resonant groaning of the glaciers shifting in the distance. Inside, however, there is a fragile warmth. A small coal stove crackles softly in the corner, throwing a gentle orange glow across the wooden walls. The smell of hot coffee and pipe tobacco fills the air. Every few hours, 2 men must bundle up in layers of heavy wool and polar bear fur. They step out into the roaring blackness to read the instruments. They measure the barometric pressure, the wind speed, the humidity. Why? Because the weather brewing in the Arctic determines the storms that will hit Europe days later. In a war of battleships and bombers, knowing the weather is a weapon of supreme importance. They broadcast their data back to Germany in encrypted code. Tick, tick, tick. The sound of the telegraph key is their only bridge to civilization. They are doing their duty, entirely unaware that the world they left behind is crumbling. As the months bleed together in the darkness, the routine becomes a sanctuary against madness. To survive the crushing isolation, the 11 men must become more than a military unit. They must become a family. In the evenings, when the weather reports are sent, they gather around the small table. They play chess. They read from a library of over 80 books they brought with them. They listen to classical music on the gramophone, the soaring melodies of Beethoven and Bach echoing softly, contrasting with the chaotic fury of the blizzard outside. Sometimes, the sky rewards their endurance. If you step outside the hut on a clear, bitter night, the wind drops to a whisper. The stars above shine with a fierce, diamond-like clarity, completely unaffected by the pollution of the distant world. And then, the sky begins to dance. The Aurora Borealis stretches across the heavens in ribbons of ethereal green, ghostly violet, and soft crimson. It folds and unfolds silently, a cosmic ballet performing for an audience of just 11 forgotten men. They watch in awe, wrapped in blankets, momentarily forgetting the war, forgetting the danger of polar bears lurking in the shadows, and finding a profound, meditative peace in the heart of the frozen desert. Spring arrives in 1945, but the warmth is a relative concept. The sun returns, scraping along the horizon, casting impossibly long blue shadows across the endless snowfields. But as the light returns, the radio signals from home grow strange. The frantic updates from Berlin become erratic. The coded orders become vague, fractured, and filled with panic. The men of Operation Haudegen listen closely to the crackling static of the shortwave radio. Then, in early May, the transmissions change completely. The military networks go dark. Through international civilian broadcasts, Wilhelm Deger and his men hear the unbelievable news. Berlin has fallen. The Führer is dead. Germany has unconditionally surrendered. The war in Europe is officially over. The men look at one another in the quiet of the hut. The crackle of the radio speaker seems louder now. They look out the window at the vast, unchanging Arctic landscape. The war is over. The world is moving on. But for the 11 men on Nordaustlandet, nothing has changed. The wind still howls. The ice still locks them in. And worse yet, nobody comes for them. In the chaos of a defeated and partitioned Germany, the tiny weather station in the far north has been completely erased from the ledgers. The high command that sent them no longer exists. The ships that were supposed to retrieve them are either sunken or captured. They are a ghost unit, completely abandoned at the end of the earth. May passes, then June, then July. The Arctic summer brings a brief thaw. The snow thins out. revealing barren grey rock and patches of resilient moss. The ice in the fjord cracks with sounds like gunshot, drifting out to sea. The men adapt. They are no longer soldiers of a collapsed Reich. They are simply survivors. They stop wearing their uniforms, opting for comfortable civilian winter gear. They ration their remaining food carefully. They fish, they hunt, and they wait. They continue to take weather measurements, recording them neatly in logbooks, even though there is no one left to broadcast them to. The routine keeps them sane. There is a strange, melancholy beauty to these months. They are entirely free, yet entirely trapped. The pressures of the world, the politics, the hatreds of the war, all of it has washed away, neutralized by the absolute indifference of the Arctic. They exist in a pocket of suspended time. Every day, they take turns scanning the horizon with binoculars, looking past the floating icebergs for a sail, a plume of smoke, a sign that the living world remembers they are still here. It is September 3rd, 1945. It has been nearly 4 months since the war officially ended. The air is turning sharply cold again. The brief summer is giving way to the autumn frost, and the men know that if they are not rescued soon, another brutal polar night will trap them, perhaps permanently. Suddenly, a shape appears on the horizon. A grey ship cuts through the waters of the fjord. It is a Norwegian vessel, the Blasel. They have finally been found. The Norwegian captain and a few men row ashore. Wilhelm Dager meets them on the rocky beach. The interaction is not tense or hostile. It is filled with a quiet, mutual relief. The Norwegians are cautious, but they see no enemy soldiers. Only tired, bearded scientists ready to go home. They share a final meal inside the wooden hut. The Germans provide their remaining rations, sharing luxury items like coffee and schnapps. They talk about the world, about what has happened during the months of silence. As the night winds down, it is time to make the surrender official. But there is a historical dilemma. The Norwegian captain is a civilian skipper, not a military officer, and he is unsure of the proper protocol for accepting a military capitulation. With a soft smile, Wilhelm Dager steps forward. He produces his service pistol, unclips it, and places it gently on the wooden table between them. He signs a formal document of surrender. With that simple, quiet gesture, the very last active unit of the German military steps down. The Second World War is truly, finally over. The men pack their journals, their instruments, and their memories, leaving the wooden hut behind. As the Blasel sails away from the coast of Svalbard, Wilhelm Dager looks back at the shrinking white shoreline. The hut grows smaller and smaller, a tiny dark speck against an immense canvas of mountain and ice, until it vanishes completely into the mist. Today, the remnants of the Haudegen station still stand in the frozen wastes of Svalbard, preserved by the intense cold. The wooden boards, weathered and greyed by decades of blizzards, remain as a monument to a strange, isolated chapter of human history. As you drift off to sleep, imagine that lonely hut standing under the glowing curtains of the northern lights. The men are gone. The war is a distant memory, but the Arctic remains. The wind still sweeps over the ridge, carrying the fine snow across the plains, singing a quiet, eternal lullaby of silence, isolation, and peace.